I was fine on 150 milligrams every 2 weeks, and then I hit a wall on day 11. 180 milligrams twice a week, and my total blew past 1,500. Now I'm anxious, and I can't sleep 24 hours after my shot. 100 milligrams a week, 3 months in, and my total is only at 233. Any of this sound familiar? I hear these and similar types of things every day. These are 3 real men, the same drug, 3 completely different outcomes. This isn't bad luck. There are specific enzymes deciding how each of these men handle their testosterone. And the variation between them is measurable, and it's published in the literature, and it's almost never named in the TRT content. This video is about the 3 mistakes that I see driving these kind of problems and what to do instead. My name's Dr. Taranella, and I work with men on TRT every single day. The pattern that seems to keep repeating itself is the guys follow the standard advice, they don't feel right, and their doctor tells them everything looks fine. The missing piece oftentimes, commonly, is the individual variation in how the body actually processes and handles the testosterone, plus labs that aren't really given the proper context for interpretation. 2 men, the exact same dose, exact same schedule, and 4 days later, their blood tests can look completely different. Not slightly, Ekström and colleagues in 2013 found that real hypogonadal men on the exact same testosterone undecanoate dose had serum peaks that ranged anywhere from 7 to 70 nanomole difference across patients. That's about a 10-fold difference on the same exact drug, the same exact dose, and the same exact protocol. Genetics certainly explain part of this. Body composition, liver clearance, sex hormone binding globulin, and other protein binding statuses also make up a portion of the difference, and so does your dose history. And this gets at the point that there's no universal TRT protocol. There's only the protocol that fits you, and that's what's most important. By the way, I built a TRT app that helps you figure out and optimize dosing with the symptoms that you're having. There'll be a link in the description if you want to check that out. Also, my book, Mastering Your TRT, goes a little bit deeper in these topics as well. And of course, as always, you can sign up to work with me as well. Now on to the 3 mistakes. The first thing that we want to look at is treating frequency as a universal fix-all or solve-all for all TRT problems. The standard kind of online advice is split the dose into twice weekly. If not twice weekly, then 3 times a week. Even every other day, you're going to get smoother levels. It's going to have fewer side effects. And for some men, yes, this is definitely a situation that makes sense. For others, though, once a week actually is fine. And in some cases, splitting the dose actually can make things even worse. The reason comes down to 2 specific things: the enzymes in your body and your dose history. Genetics are always important for every situation that we run into with health problems, but with testosterone, glucuronidation comes to mind as it's one of the main inactivation pathways for testosterone. It's a way that our bodies get rid of or reduce the amount of testosterone in our bodies. And problems with the UGT2B17 is the predominant problem that comes up with glucuronidation. It has a common depletion polymorphism. Studies have found that a single 300 milligram dose of testosterone in men with an intact gene cleared roughly 20 times the amount of testosterone than someone with the full deletion. Same exact dose, totally different serum levels over time. And this isn't some obscure thing. About 9% of European men will have this deletion, and 2/3 of men in East Asia will have this as well. And there are other polymorphic parts on that gene as well, leading to reduced glucuronidation activity. Other gene pathways can have similar polymorphic variants. Genetics for DHT, for instance, may change how much DHT you're making. Same with the aromatase enzyme, and sulfation, which is a backup when the glucuronidation isn't working the way it should. So say you have a problem with the glucuronidation and sulfation, now that testosterone is sticking around much longer. You stack some of these variants together and you get the similar problem that Ekström found with somewhere around 10-fold difference in serum levels. Even though they injected the same dose, they started around the same level, and you're checking at the same time interval. Now, dose history also matters for this, and testosterone cypionate has a half-life of around 8 days. The steady state takes roughly 5 half-lives, so that would be 40 days. So two men on 120 milligrams a week today are not necessarily at the same point on that curve. It kind of depends when they started. So for instance, one has been on 80 milligrams for 6 months and just bumped up to the 120, and he's climbing towards a new higher steady state. The other came down from 200, descending toward the lower one, 120 milligrams, and at 5 days, their number can differ quite drastically, even though they're on the same dose this week or even the last 2 or 3 weeks. Most online advice and even some TRT clinics treat every dose as if the patient started yesterday, but the body doesn't treat it that way. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this mistake section is the standard advice being to check your trough levels and adjust off the trough. The trough by itself is part of the picture. It's half, basically. If a patient pulls a trough level at day 7 and the number is, say, 380, and the reflex is, well, let's increase your dose because that's a little bit low. No matter what the symptoms are, we don't really care. You're probably related to low testosterone, right? But the peak early in the week could have been 1400 for the total testosterone. So in this case, bumping the dose pushes the peak even higher. Now you're driving estradiol, hematocrit, and that anxiety 24 hours after, heart palpitations, or whatever's going on, and making it even worse. The trough is certainly important, but the interpretation in this case was wrong because you only had half the picture. You need both. A true trough right before your next injection and midweek around day 3 or 4 if you're doing once a week to capture that peak. And it's different if you're doing twice a week. You still want to get the peak in the trough. The trough tells you the floor, the midweek tells you the ceiling. And so the second mistake is the one where a lot of TRT forums get it wrong consistently, but the published data is a little more honest about it. The claim is that subcutaneous testosterone produces dramatically smoother pharmacokinetics than the intramuscular roller coaster. There's therefore fewer side effects and it's better tolerated. And so I went back and looked at some of the head-to-head research in the literature, and that picture is certainly a little more honest than what the standard advice is. Wilson and colleagues, 2008, direct Subq versus IM. Subq was well tolerated, delivered equivalent testosterone levels compared to the IM, but they flagged wide intra and inter-patient variability, same genetic and dose history variability we talked about above. That's going to show up regardless of the route that you choose. Another study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism was a retrospective study, and it looked at testosterone cypionate and enanthate, and they found that it was effective, safe, and preferred by patients for its convenience. Another study found that testosterone stayed stable between Subq injections. And so it's not like we don't have any data on the Subq versus IM. There is some validation here that it does work and it is safe. There's one more piece that gets cited as if the Subq is better across the board, no matter who's doing it and how much you're taking. And that is the subcutaneous enanthate auto-injector. So this study used a specific delivery device and the specific product with a 27-gauge 5/8 inch needle in castor oil. And it was testosterone enanthate. And it did produce lower hematocrit and lower estradiol compared to the intramuscular at 12 weeks. And so if this is actually reproducible with a manual Subq with slightly different ester and slightly different carrying agent, we would expect roughly the same idea, a little lower estrogen and a little lower hematocrit. At the same time, though, it might not, because it is a different ester, it is a different oil, and it's actually a different needle delivery system. The bigger practical thing that I like to stress to my patients, how it's going to actually fit into your life. If you can't really remember to dose more than once a week, you're going to be chasing your tail trying to keep up with this, and that's going to lead to worse outcomes than actually just doing it once a week. Frequency and adherence matters more than the route. If you're picking Subq because it's going to lower your hematocrit, or if it's feeling more smoothly and then you actually only inject once a week, anyways, you're not really getting a smoother curve. You're actually getting a worse curve. So you just want to make sure you're able to stick with that if you're going to choose that route. And there's nothing wrong with trying. The honest summary is Subq is actually pretty effective and it's safe, and there's no reason not to do it except for the fact that you are going to want to do it a little bit more frequently if that's the route that you're going to choose. The other thing is you don't want to just go off of how you feel. You want to confirm with your labs. Both your lab reports and how you're feeling are what's going to keep you healthy and safe in the long run. And my personal experience, the Subq seems to be about equivalent to intramuscular in terms of how it performs on the pharmacokinetics, the hematocrit, the estrogen, etc. I think the much smoother claim is overstated relative to what the head-to-head data show and what my clinical experience show. but I would be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. What have you found with this? Now, mistake 3, I see ruining dose decisions more than the first two, and that is not getting your actual free testosterone when you're checking your blood to see how your levels are actually doing. And I covered free testosterone on this channel before. I'm covering it again because sometimes I see people on testosterone at TRT clinics and they're actually not ordering the free testosterone. The total T comes back and the doctor says, well, looks pretty good. It's optimized, and that dosing decision gets kind of put off despite the person not really feeling good because, well, hey, you have enough in your body, so let's move on. It must be something else. And nobody pulled the numbers that would actually tell them what's happening in their body with regard to their androgen levels. And testosterone in your blood is mostly bound to carrier proteins. Some of those carrier proteins are going to bind very tightly, and some of them are going to bind somewhat loosely, like albumin. But there's roughly 1 to 2% of your testosterone, your total testosterone, is going to be truly free and available to bind to the receptor. Now, if you're at 800 milligrams per deciliter, a 1% versus a 2% is actually pretty big. So these units get a little bit tricky. So let me walk you through some of this. So the total T is reported in nanograms per deciliter. Free T is reported usually in picograms per milliliter. These are different units. If your total T is 600, that's 6,000 picograms per ml. 1 to 2% of that is 60 or 120 picograms per ml, which is within the range of normal free testosterone. And so that 1 to 2% isn't a guess. It's validated with mass spec liquid chromatography studies. This has been established since the 1960s, and it's been refined ever since then. So the free testosterone is what crosses into the cell and into your tissues and what the body actually uses. Total T is just in the serum, and it's bound to some other protein and basically rendered inert until it's no longer bound to that. So if your doctor is optimizing for your total T alone, you're optimizing off a number that basically is largely unimportant. Two men can sit at the exact same total level and have completely different free testosterone levels. For example, patient A has a total testosterone of 700. The free comes back high. He's symptomatic from too much free testosterone. We'll say at the trough, it's 140. And he's anxious, he's irritable, he's sleep disturbance, and his hematocrit is climbing. The move here is not a dose increase, it's a dose decrease, or maybe a frequency change, or both. Patient B, same total T, 700, but his free comes back low. It comes back at 70. He still feels basically all the hypogonadal symptoms. He's very tired, low libido. In this case, the answer isn't a dose decrease. Even though the total looks fine, it's working up why his free testosterone is so low to begin with. It tells you something about the binding picture without necessarily needing a separate test, sex hormone binding line, or something else. It's actually within the percentage right there. One more thing on this topic to wrap things up that I think this really matters is how you measure your testosterone really changes what you see. Most labs report a calculated free testosterone derived from the total T and a carrier protein and albumin using the Vermeulen equation. Calculated free is fine for trending and monitoring if nothing really is unusual, but it can be falsely reassuring in certain situations. When the carrier protein is low or low normal, the actual free testosterone is also low. The equation sees a low binder and assumes more free testosterone, and it gives you a number that looks okay, but the patient is still symptomatic. And that's because the calculator is overshooting what your actual free testosterone is. So you want to run the mass spec liquid chromatography that's going to measure your free testosterone directly. No formula, no assumption, no calculation. It's a more accurate number, and it's what catches the falsely okay calculated results. When you're getting inconsistent results or the call is like borderline, the calculated version doesn't actually help that much. And if we layer this back into mistake number 1, the man with the glucuronidation deletion clears testosterone slowly to begin with, his free T can run higher than his total predicts. A man with a high aromatization activity converts more testosterone to estradiol, and his free T will move with that, basically going to move down. So enzyme variability shows up in these calculators as well. So that's why it's important to have the free testosterone along with the total testosterone so you get the full picture and use that mass spec liquid chromatography. Quick ask before we close this out. If this was useful, please hit the subscribe button. The TRT app is in the description. The Mastering TRT book is there too. And if you want to work with me, check out the link below. And hit me up in the comment section if you have anything to share about your specific protocol and your history. Mistake number 3 is really a dose calibration problem. And the moment you start watching your free testosterone instead of just your total, you start noticing patterns that point at the dose itself being wrong. Too high, too low, peak running away from you. And there are specific warning signs that tell you when your TRT dose is off. And if you want to learn more about that, you can watch this video right here.